Matthew 4 verses 18 to 20 and it says there, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into a lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. Okay, so just 3 verses. And in those 3 verses is one of my favourite parts of the Bible, because within that kind of just that tiny passage, there's just some truths that have really stuck with me throughout my kind of life and my journey, through my real kind of long journey of really accepting Jesus and really deciding that I really wanted to follow him, and what it's meant since then, and that process of following him. And for me, it kind of talks about, we're going to look at these 3 points very briefly, that Jesus isn't buying into our kind of systems of how we value people, who's the best and which people to pick. We're going to look at the fact that Jesus isn't going to map out an easy plan for us to follow, and then finally we're going to see that Jesus is worth giving it all up for. And so that's what we're going to look at, because as I said, my journey is very much one that I kind of grew up in a church, and I was very much kind of looking around the church that I was in going, people talk about Jesus a lot, but is he really kind of worth all this? Because I hear a lot of talk from a lot of people, and then ultimately, because I was this kind of loudmouth kid at the church, I had a lot of people tell me how great Jesus was, and how this is what you needed to do. I didn't see a lot of kind of, yeah, Jesus is that great, and look how great you all are to me. I went to this place that I didn't really want to go to, because my parents went, and I went there and I got told off a lot, and I was like, wow, yeah, I really want to be like you guys. No, not at all. And so it was a really difficult thing for me, trying to weigh up kind of the stuff that they would say, and the people that I saw. And there were a lot of people now that I've grown up, I realise that they weren't all as horrible as maybe I perceived when I was a child. But yeah, certainly it felt like that. And so we're going to look at our 3 points. My clicker's not working, I'm putting it down. So the first thing we're going to look at is that they were fishermen. Now, my wife's probably dreading it already, because as soon as she sees that time, she's going to talk about Grimsby, isn't he? Absolutely right. I grew up in Grimsby. Anyone ever been to Grimsby? Whoa! It's a lovely place, isn't it? Yes, it is. I'll put you on the spot. You couldn't say anything else. Good. Oh, finally I had someone who's... That's the first. Apart when I spoke in Grimsby, a lot of everything. And so Grimsby is a town obsessed with fish. Literally just everywhere. Like our football team's called the Mariners. We have loads of our songs that are about fishing. It's just embarrassing. And so we've got one song which goes na 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 fish. Na 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 fish. And over again. It's not a crowd you want to be in. Every time I take Anna home, we kind of talk to my mum and dad, and they go, oh, what are you doing? Who are you going to go and see? And we'll tell them our plans. Every time pretty much mum will say, have you taken Anna to see the National Fishing Heritage Museum? Surprisingly not. She's not lucky enough yet. I think she's got to earn that. Maybe a bit further on into our marriage. Maybe for an anniversary. Maybe like our 5th or our 10th. A really special time, the National Fishing Heritage Museum. You get to see an old trawler. Yeah, I know. For better or for worse. And so Jesus goes to these fishermen. Okay, and there's kind of arguments about did he know them or whatever. But the thing is, Jesus doesn't go to these kind of top people. He doesn't kind of weigh up, right, I need to put together a team of 12. He's not kind of like Lord Sugar putting together the apprentices. I need a funny one, a clever one. I need one who's good at sales. He just kind of walks up to these fishermen and goes, right, follow me. It's not much of a strategy. You kind of almost want to say, Jesus, well, you could end up with some rogues here. And so you kind of think, it's a bit of a risky kind of play, that you've got all these kind of people who know a lot of stuff about the Bible, know a lot of stuff about the kind of law at this time. And it just seems a little bit at times haphazard. There's another story where he goes up to a tax collector and just says, there's a guy sat there as a tax collector, and Jesus goes up to him and goes, you follow me. And it just seems like he's just picking blokes. I don't know particularly why. I kind of like the fact that maybe in Matthew, in the version I've got in Matthew 4 in my Bible, where he says, verse 20, he says, for they were fishermen, he says, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. I kind of almost think, I've got a good line here. I need a fisherman. I need a fisherman for the line. If I can call one of the fishermen as my disciples, I've got a great line about fish. And so he gets them in. I'm sure there's probably more to it than that. But in our lives, we kind of assign these values to people, whether we're watching The Apprentice, which me and my wife love, or The Voice, or Britain's Got Talent, or sports. It's all about kind of ranking who's good and who should go through and who's not, and who should not go through. So if you watch The Apprentice, you will know that the guy with the glasses and the quiff should go through because he's very good. you'll know that Neil Clough, and I only know his name because he keeps referring to himself as Neil Clough. Oh, Neil Clough's done this well. You are Neil Clough. Why are you referring to yourself as Neil Clough? And so he's quite good, and all the women are really bad. And so not in women, just on The Apprentice. And so, but those shows, they kind of make you cast those judgments. You kind of think, well, that person's good, that person's not so good. In singing contests, they're good, not so good. Football, the finance of football is out of control. Like, the wages that footballers get paid, we all know, is ridiculous. But the problem is, if you want to be the best, as a football club, you can't say to your players, well, I'm not paying you that anymore, because all the best players will leave, and so therefore you'll end up getting relegated. And it's all about staying at the top and being the best. And all the fans want to be associated with being the best. Like Lucas is a Chelsea fan. Do you think he was a Chelsea fan before Roman Abramovich took over? Yeah. Of course he wasn't. Of course he wasn't. He supported like Charlton or something. Of course he just jumped in. You know, he's not like some of us who support our lower league teams. He insists that he was. Oh, right. Fair enough. And so, as a Grimsby fan, obviously I don't really support anyone good, but if you look at the next screen, that is my only shot at glory is football now, fantasy football, which is not a real thing. And so every year, my only kind of hope of kind of looking at good footballers is I pick my fantasy football team. And again, I don't just pick any 12 or 15 as a squad of randoms. You try and pick the best. You try and pick the ones who are going to score you the most points, who you value the most, that kind of stuff. And so in our society, we create these kind of ladders and whatever it is, league tables, grades, rich lists. We kind of rank where we are. We want to know where we are in the kind of table. And on the Voice that we were watching the other day, me and my wife, one of the guys who was on there said, I just want to show, you know, the fact that I've made it to the live shows is a real encouragement to young people that they too can make it. And it's just kind of almost offensive, the idea that you could have only made it and you're only something if you've somehow made it onto a TV show, or if you got into the top 12 then, oh, you're that place in the ladder and now you're valuable. But if you haven't made it there, well then maybe you're not worth as much if you've just got a kind of a normal job in a normal town, like pretty much all of us. It's just really kind of doing your best to live out your lives and follow Jesus in our context here. But as Jesus comes, it's almost like he doesn't kind of buy into this system of going, right, well, not bother about where you think people fit. Jesus hangs around with the women, he hangs around with the lepers, the sinners, the tax collectors, the people that everyone have been like, whoa, you know, we're separated from them. If you're a legal, if you're a kind of a pastor, if you're going to be a church leader, you can't be associated with these people here. And Jesus kind of smashes that all up. And it's almost like he's trying to send us a deliberate message. That our systems of who we think, oh, they're quite clever, or they're quite funny, they've got a lot of money, they're worth a lot, and the people who maybe haven't got as much, they're worth less. And Jesus is trying to send us, I think, as much as possible, the most obvious of statements, that that's not what he's about, and that's not what the value is. And if we've got another slide here about a CV, if you flick through to one more, there we go. Now, a few years ago, I worked at an accountancy firm. It's exciting times. And so I worked for like a big accountancy firm, you know, one of the big horrible ones. And so at that time, we kind of did a lot of university things where we kind of went into universities and taught them various like negotiation skills, how to get a job at a big firm. And as part of that, these kind of uni students would show us their CVs, and we'd kind of give them advice on how to improve it and that kind of stuff. And my mate was kind of chatting this through with this final year university student. He said, as he was talking to this person, he was chewing some gum, and this chewing gum just kind of dropped out of his mouth onto the middle of their CV. But he said this person was so desperate for a job that no, they didn't even mention it, they just pretended it hadn't happened. And they would flinch, and they were pointing at things like around this big lob of chewing gum in the middle of it. Oh yeah, that's wrong. And they would just kind of ignore the bit that was obscured by the chewing gum. Well, yeah, that bit's wrong as well. And in the end, no one was too polite to say anything. In the end, this girl just kind of walked off with her CV with this chewing gum just in the middle, just going, oh, fair enough. And he was like, but she was so polite, she didn't dare say anything. I think there's a kind of element that if we try and kind of build up this CV, and I always thought this as a kid, because my parents were big on education, that to be part of the church and to get in with Jesus, I had to do loads of good stuff. And it's only because as I got older that no matter how many good things I do and how much I try and put on my CV to be accepted, ultimately it's always this kind of, it's never going to be good enough, it's this blob of stuff, all these mistakes and sin and the mess up that I've made in my life. I can't say that church to Jesus and go, is that good enough? Because it's never going to be good enough. But the good thing is, Jesus said, forget the CV. I'm not bothered about you trying to weigh up your goods and bads and whether you deserve to follow me. He just said, I've come to ask you to follow me. I'm not bothered about your credentials. I'm not bothered about what you can show me, what you can offer me. And that's kind of the story of God, that none of us are good enough, but we've got an amazing God who comes into ordinary people and takes us on this journey, no matter what our history, no matter what we do. The second point that he just says, follow me, which is a bit vague. You kind of want Jesus to say, right, to follow me involves, write this down, I've got 4 points. And you know when he doesn't do that, you kind of think, Jesus, if you could just tell me exactly what it means, we kind of get that. Now when I teach, I'm an accountancy lecturer, and it gets more exciting. Grimsby accountants, I know what you're thinking, Hannah is a lucky lady, isn't she? Exactly right. And so when I teach a topic that's got 4 points in it, students love it, because I can say, right, this is what you do this, you'll pass that question. And they're like, right. But I teach a topic called cash flow statements, which I have an approach to do, but it's 8 steps. You should see the carnage 8 steps courses. Because we can't do 8. I can't remember 8, I need 4. Honestly, I promise you, this is the best way. And once you try and teach people 8 steps, I said, right, you have a go. They'll just go, no, I'm going to do it my own way. There must be a quicker, shorter, easier way to understand. It is madness. And so Jesus doesn't even give us 8 steps. Okay, the closest he gets is some guy in Mark 12 says to him, right, Jesus, what's the best commandment? And I get the feeling that this guy maybe is thinking, right, if you can just tell me the top one, and then I can keep the top one, and then I'll be alright. And so, if I was this guy, I'd probably be thinking, right, Jesus, can you just say, don't murder? Because that's quite an easy one to follow. I'm quite good at the non-murdering thing. And so if you can say, right, the biggest one, don't kill anyone, I'm in. I've got that, Jesus. Fine. Now, Jesus, unfortunately, doesn't give him that nice answer. He says, right, well, you've got 2. He says, right, love the Lord your God with all your heart. So, just all of my heart, soul and mind. Thanks, God. Okay, easy. Second one, love your neighbour as yourself. And that's it. There's these kind of 2 bullet points. Well, they're quite vague. They're quite wide-ranging. Okay, and loving our neighbour is going to mean a different thing to all of us. Like, some of us in this church have got a real passion for kind of orphans and adoption, and that's what loving our neighbour means. Some of us have got a real passion for kind of people who are in extreme poverty, whether that's globally, and we've got connections to Tanzania and kind of helping these people get educated. This guy sending him to become a teacher there, whether it's locally and people who can't afford to eat, and we've got food bank people who care about people who are maybe fatherless people, the young people. There's different things to all of us, okay? Jesus saying loving your neighbour, yes, there's principles there, but it doesn't mean, right, loving your neighbour means you do X, Y, Z. It's going to mean something different for all of us. And as I've kind of gone through that journey and realised that following Jesus isn't about him saying, right, you've got to do this. It's more about a relationship and understanding him. There's a great quote that we've got coming up here. It's a really difficult quote. There's 2 parts. So let's read the first part to start with. From a guy called Donald Miller. He says, the truth is there are a million steps and we don't even know what the steps are. And worse, at any given moment we might not be willing or even able to take them. Still worse, they're different for you and me and they're always changing. Okay, which is not great. You think, well, how do we follow that? And if you sit to the second bit, and then he says, I've come to believe that the sooner we find this truth beautiful, the sooner we fall in love with the God who keeps shaking things up, keeps changing the path, keeps rocking the boat to test our faith in him, and teaching us not to rely on easy answers, bullet points, magic mantras or genies and lamps, but rather in his guidance, his existence, his mercy and his love. Because if we did things the same way, this church that we're in today, we won't be here. We're here because a few people just felt God saying, do you know what, I told you to be in Witness or other towns in around the area, or other places in Warrington at that point, but now things have changed. Okay, what God tells you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, a year ago, doesn't mean that that's that for life, right? That's what you're going to be, done. Okay, it changes, and the way that we've got to respond to Jesus is by keeping in relationship with him and keeping following him. Because when he says, follow me, it's not just a case of, right, follow me, you've got, here's a book, but you do these things, and if you live that way, you'll be alright. It's about this kind of relationship, this dynamic relationship of trust for a God who's desperate to know us and desperate to have that relationship with us. And my uni mates, when I was there, they never quite could get it. They were like, I can't be a Christian now because I can't go out and not get drunk. I can't do these things. And I can see, if you don't know Jesus and you reduce it to that, I can see why people think, well, I can't do it. Because if you take Jesus out of it, it is just rules. And it is just kind of lifestyle things. But when you bring Jesus into it, it brings this whole dynamic of relationship and wanting to follow him. Like we're here, I said to Anna, I don't really want to move to Warrington about a year and a half ago. And then I said, well, I can't move to Warrington because we need a car, because I work in Liverpool, we need another car. And then we get given a car. So I said, fine, we'll go to Warrington. And then she says, I think God wants us to plant a church. I said, me and you cannot plant a church. And so eventually, a few months later, Lucas comes up and says, I think I want to plant a church in Warrington, in Latchford, where you live. Okay, fine, God. And so then I was like, just a few months ago, I was like, I'm really tired of this commute to Liverpool. And then all of a sudden I got this job, which means I don't have to drive to Liverpool 80% of the time. And so this relationship of living with God is all about this trust in Him and knowing Him and closeness with Him. And I fight it all the time, going, God, I can't see that. And I'm an accountant, I need logic, God. And God's like, a lot of logic, God. So you can't I'm not going to map it out so you know what to do. You've got to trust me and you've got to follow me. But I kind of go back, there should be another slide here. That is a place called Imam Fried Chicken where I used to live in Nottingham. Now every single time I had chicken from that place, I threw up. Every single time. Now I realise you might think, well surely you should just do that once. Maybe twice. Once you've done it twice, that's it. But when you walk past that chicken shop and it's maybe in the evening and you smell that chicken, you're thinking, I'll be alright this time. I'll be alright this time. 6 or 7 times later I was learning a lesson. And I promise you, never once did I keep it down. And so it is not good. And the problem is, as a human being, I kind of trust in God. I just tend to just kind of want to pull away and go, God, but I'm happy with my systems of logic and I want to prove myself and I want to do well. So I go back to this kind of old system of showing that I can be valuable, showing that I can be good at stuff. And again, God brings me back and says, can you just trust me? And that reliance on me and that following of me. And God's so patient. Even the disciples, as they're following Him, at one point He kind of sees them and they're arguing about which one of them is the greatest. As if, these people are walking with Jesus and still clearly not just getting it. And it's not about, you've got to walk with Jesus and get it straight away. And the final thing we've got, we'll finish with this, is the third thing He says, is that they left their nets and followed Him. Okay, so of course, it costs. There's a woman called Danielle Strickland that me and Anna heard about a couple of years ago now, and she goes into brothels and kind of just really loves the prostitutes and tells them they don't have to, life doesn't have to be like this. And she takes them cupcakes and she says it's the most horrible thing that she does. And she said every week she doesn't want to go. And of course she doesn't want to go, it's a terrible place. But she said every week she just wants to, and it's not just that it's terrible, although that's definitely obviously part of it. She just says, I just want to sit, I don't want to watch TV. And of course you do, right? It's such a natural thing. And for us to sit here and say, following Jesus is just this kind of nice lifestyle, it's not going to, of course it's going to cost us. These people left their nets and they walked after Him because love costs, love hurts at times. Like, if you want to invest in a relationship, well then you're going to have to give up something in terms of being selfish in your selfish ways. And Jesus came for our relationship to give Himself up, to come down, to give up heaven, to live out His life and ultimately end His life being spat at, being abused, having abuse hurled at Him while He was naked on a cross. While the people He came to save just kind of all mocked Him and walked away. Okay, and the great thing is that the story doesn't end there. That Jesus said, even though that was the case, He came back to life, and He came back and somehow decides to call us His people. The people who would do that to Him. He decides that He wants to love us and calls His people. We've just got a couple of verses here. And John 16, someone said last week, which is really relevant, I think. Jesus says to His people as they were following Him, I've told you these things that you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus knew the trouble His disciples faced, He knew the trouble we would face, but He knew that when He came back to life on that cross, that He would beat that, and that we have overcome the world, and that no matter what people do to us, ultimately our future will be with Him. And I've got just one final quote, that's not a Bible verse, then a Bible verse, and then we'll finish. And it says, so just on the same guy I read before, he says, he's just talking about his journey of trying to abandon this kind of journey of pleasing God and doing these 4 steps and keeping God happy. And he said it wrecked him, and then he says, on this journey you may travel through the same dark night of the soul through which I have come. But on the other side, I assure you, is Christ, and you will love Him for what He has done. And then he goes on to say, you will stand bloody from the battle, kneeling before Him, knowing He is all the hope you have. And hopefully, in a delightful moment of freedom, realise that He is always the only hope that you need. Okay, and so the final verse that we've got from there says, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Okay, and so, the truth is that we are all new people called by an amazing God, but somehow, despite how often we try and run away and go back to our systems, despite what we did when He came to earth to Him, despite all the mistakes we made, He wants to call us, this kind of broken mess, His people. And one day we get to spend eternity with him. And so no matter who we are, no matter if we've not heard anything about Jesus or whether we've been following him for 50 years, the call comes to us all that follow me. You know, today, follow me. Whether you don't know anything about him or whether you're just following him and you've been following him all your life, we still need to follow him. Not just relying on what we think we know, the things that we're comfortable with, but that trust that can only come from knowing God, and living our lives in honesty and submission to him, handing it over, knowing that he is the one that will make all things new. So I'm just going to pray and then we're done. So God, I just thank you that, just that in our journeys, those of us that know you, Lord, that you found us where we were, Lord, and you called us to follow us, Lord. I thank you that as that journey's gone on, that, we would go nowhere else, Lord. We would find nothing else of value but in you, Lord. But I just pray for those of us who don't know you, or for those of us who struggle to just walk away at times, Lord. I just pray that you would help us, Lord, just in this moment, just to lay down our lives to you, Lord, just that we will put our trust in you and just acknowledge, Lord, that there is nowhere else to go but you. Just pray that in your name.